Good morning, everyone. This is Penny Poley from Wisconsin Land+Water, and thank you for joining us today for the Developing a County Streambank Easement Program, a roadmap for landowners and counties webinar. Duke, if you want to mute yourself, and if anybody else has yourself out there, why don't you mute yourself? I'm getting some feedback, and I think I'm going to do a quick introduction also of Duke. John Duke Welter of Iroquois is the outreach coordinator for Trout Unlimited Driftless Area Restoration Effort. It's TUDARE, maybe, which works to develop watershed restoration projects across the unglaciated area of southwestern and western Wisconsin, southeast Minnesota, northeast Iowa, and northwest Illinois. He is a former member of the Wisconsin Natural Resources Board and National Trout Unlimited Board of Trustees, and he's a recovering attorney. And he's also retiring this Thursday. So we got him quick before he left us, and we're happy to have him do our presentation today. So Duke, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, Penny. Thank you. It's a treat to be with you this morning, and I hope that we'll get some messages across that'll resonate in your counties. So we'll just jump into the PowerPoint, and if you have questions along the way, shoot them at Penny and on the chat line, and we'll talk afterwards too. We'll have a question and answer afterwards. Well, it's a nice day to spend a little time inside and get out of the muck boots and rain gear, and be able not to be doing a field walk along a stream with a landowner or something today. I should add that one of the treats of being able to work with the driftless area restoration effort is I get to work with our project manager, Jeff Hastings, who many of you may know from his long time as a Vernon County conservationist before he came to work for TU and really moved the driftless area restoration effort forward. And also with Paul Cron, who's also a former Vernon County land conservationist, or the county conservationist, also in this position working across the driftless area. It's been a treat to work with other good county conservationists and technicians in those county LCDs on developing projects, and along the way we've helped to develop some good easement programs. That'll be the way. I'll give you a little roadmap of the discussion today, using a typical roadmap that resides in my car, and I've centered it on Viroqua, where I live, and but you can see the holes and gaps and bends and folds and dirt and stuff. I think I go through about 8 roadmaps a year of the state, and even more of the driftless area part of the state. Well, I'll just offer you a few introductory comments so you can get an idea of where a lot of our driftless area work is done and what's going on here, and then we'll get into easement basics and how and why they might be of value to your county, and what they need to include. And trust me, I've as a recovering attorney, I am really happy to leave the technical legal stuff to people who are currently practicing licensed attorneys. I've had a joyous time ever since I retired from that career, and I won't get too deep into the legals, but there are some absolute basic parts of this. And then how to put together a program for your county, and then once such a program's in place, what comes next? How do you put it to use to the benefit of your landowners and your streams and your county and your communities? So we'll just go forward from there. You might be wondering who I am anyway, and as Penny's alluded, I've had a checkered career, starting as a newspaper reporter in Madison, and then practicing law for almost 29 years in private civil practice, based first in Madison and then in Eau Claire, but practicing pretty much in the western and southern half of the state, if you could look at it that way. I also spent time on Wisconsin Natural Resources Board from 2004 to 2011, and served as the chair of its stewardship subcommittee, so that we were often purchasing land and easements for use by the public around the state to protect special areas and recreational areas. And that was in that position, I had the responsibility for being one of the people that approved something like $400 million worth of state purchases over the time I was on the board. I think it was good for the state. And then with Trout Unlimited, I've worked as a volunteer, a local chapter leader, state chapter leader, national trustee, and chair of the National Volunteer Leadership Group, the National Leadership Council. And in that position, we helped develop a national position on public access to streams, a policy that is still in place. We developed a sort of a Streambank, which was kind of a land trust effort to try and protect special places that had to do with cold water streams across the country. And also in that TU role as a volunteer and as a staff member, I've worked with developing easements since the mid to late 90s. So that's about 20 years that I've worked with nonprofit organizations and land trusts and counties and some other units of government, and also worked with the DNR on its efforts to obtain streambank easements along streams in Wisconsin. That started about 2013. So I've worked with a lot of people and groups on developing easement programs, and some of those have turned into really excellent county easement programs. And I should note that there are counties that already have excellent easement programs up and running. And up in Monroe County, Bob McKeel and his land conservation department have just an absolutely excellent arrangement. And the other counties, including Vernon County, have been working with easements for quite a while. Now, I thought we were going to all be able to see each other on this thing, and you know, this is how I figured that you'd probably all look out there. And I'm not sure if I'm doing something wrong. I'm a little new to GoToMeeting here, but some of you may recognize some faces from that group. It was either that or the Hollywood Squares folks. So most of my work the last 10 years with Trout Unlimited as a staff member, and for 7 years before that as a volunteer, has been centered in the driftless area. And you can see the green area is western and southwestern Wisconsin, but we also include goodly chunks of Minnesota, Iowa, and a small chunk of Illinois. And it has, it's an area about the size of West Virginia, which has about 600 cold water watersheds, which are the kind of water that trout need. And it has about 6,000 miles of trout streams. And you can see we're right here in the heart of the driftless. But my remarks today are going to be focused on Wisconsin. Now, one thing that usually happens when somebody from Trout Unlimited presents is that somebody in the audience is going to want to see some pictures of fish. So I'm going to take care of that quickly, and then we'll move on. So there are the mandatory fish porn figures. These are not driftless areas fish. The one in the lower left is a Mekong River catfish, and the one in the upper right is a Columbia River sturgeon. So we've gotten through that, but let's go next to fish that are actually in our part of the world and naturally reproducing fish in cold water streams. The left is a brown trout. Now that is a Minnesota fish, but we kind of, it's illustrative of the average brown trout you find in the driftless area. And then in the upper right is the most beautiful fish, the brook trout, that is a native to the area. And in the right is a naturally occurring tiger trout, which is a brook brown hybrid that it occurs in many streams where both those species, brooks and browns, reproduce. They both spawn in the fall, And in those streams, you can often find a brook trout, or a tiger trout. You know, in our neck of the woods, you know, we're such a strongly Scandinavian community, but we do take our fishing seriously, and we are projecting a new look for the Westby Norseman to reflect that fishing heritage. And in Vernon County, I understand that 34% of the stream miles have legal public access, and Monroe and La Crosse County also have a goodly number of miles of public access, and that's a real benefit to the community that I'll talk about a little farther along. So let's talk a little bit about public easements, public fishing easements along streams. The first thing is to just describe an easement a little bit, and what it is if you think about all the interests that you could own in land, they're like in law school they always describe that as it's a bundle of sticks. You buy a piece of land, and it gives you the right to or you have purchased the right to use the land in certain ways, but that might be subject to agricultural regulations or zoning regulations. You can build on it if the building code allows you a permit. You can do with the soil what you want to do with the soil, subject to some requirements about or some advisory things, voluntary things about land use. You might buy the mineral rights, or you might not. In the West, you might buy the water rights, or you might not. Well, in the case of a stream, you also have the right to control who gets onto that land that you bought. But in the case of a stream that goes through that land, there are some limitations on your ability to use that stream, and some rights of the public that are in the stream. The public has a right, on any navigable water in Wisconsin to use the stream for fishing or wading or paddling, or as long as they stay in the stream. And that's a long established right, goes back well over 100 years in Wisconsin law, called the public trust rights. And so as long as somebody on this piece of land that you bought, let's say along Timber Coulee on the Vernon La Crosse County line, as long as somebody keeps their feet wet in that stream, they can walk in the stream, and they can get in at a bridge like the Olstad Road Bridge here. And as long as they get in at the right of way, they can go all the way up to the next bridge, and you really don't have any ability to kick them off or fence them out. They have a right to use it. But the place, where do easements come in? Easements give anglers the right to walk along a strip of land. In fact, the landowner is providing a right of trespass, or selling a right of trespasser to the public, so that they can use a strip along that stream for their public use. In this case, that's pictured, it's a Wisconsin DNR owned easement, and the Wisconsin DNR buys easements, but on streams that they consider of high priority for recreation and stream protection and fish habitat and water quality. But in many county easements across the state, those easements are donated to the county or to the public in some other way. They may not be a high enough priority stream for the DNR to put stewardship money into it, or there might be some other reason to want to protect that. But generally, it's to allow the public access, and to allow fisheries habitat restoration work and maintenance of that work. Now, easements, for the most part in the state, have become something that once it starts, it's a perpetual easement. It's an easement that runs with the land. So when you sell it, if there's an easement in place, it goes with the land to the next owner. And one of the benefits of an easement is that it's flexible. If you had a place on this point in the right-hand side of this easement where you wanted to have a family campground and you wanted to have that not be public, well, the easement could describe that remains yours. In that area, the strip is narrower to accommodate your campground, and it's going to be signed to notify people that they don't have the right to walk through your campground. Now, we're going to turn next to a county easement, and here's an easement from one of the best easement programs in the county easements in the state, and that's Buffalo County. They have an excellent easement vehicle, a document that they start from as a model, and I think you've been provided with that. But they also have an excellent mapping program so that the public can go online and see all the easements that Buffalo County holds. And you'll note that in this case, this is Denoozer Valley Creek, which is a Wamandee Creek tributary near the village of Montana. And it's just upstream from the confluence of Wamandee and Denoozer. And you can see the yellow strip here, which is a 40-foot wide walking strip along the stream, which has all been had habitat improvement and replanting in a project. And it also has access routes, which are very important in this situation, because you can see the yellow strip doesn't cross a bridge. So you don't have in that piece of ownership, you don't have access from a bridge. So at the upper end and near the lower end, there are designated paths for walk-in access. And the other thing that is excellent about the Buffalo County easement program is, the access strip is 20 feet wide, by the way, just for foot access. But the other thing that's excellent about the Buffalo County easement program is that there's a 40-foot grass strip on each side of the easement before you get to the cropland. So in a valley floor where people are planting beans or corn or other crops, they need to keep a 40-foot grass strip between the edge of the easement and the start of the cropland. And what that does, that has a really important, some really important benefits, and it's working really great in Buffalo County. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. There it is. Why include grass buffers? Well, you can see on the left-hand picture, this is another Buffalo County stream, Swins Valley Creek, which is west of Arcadia. You can see the easement itself, which is the little rougher grass corridor right along the stream, but then you can see the grass corridor before you get to the cropland. That catches sediment and runoff and nutrients from the row crop area, and it filters it before it gets to the stream. The other thing it does is it allows the whole easement and the slope banks allow floodwaters to rise gradually without eating away at the banks and eroding them and encouraging meanders that are going to run back into the cornfield or back into the bean field. So you end up with a relatively stabilized corridor. There's some movement in it, but not anywhere near as much as we have in flood situations. And you have cleaner water that's coming into the stream from the nearby cropland. This cropland on the left-hand side, this picture was taken about 4 days after a 4-inch rain, and the water rose up high enough to knock down the grasses along the easement, and then it also went out into the grassy strip. But you can see it didn't cause any damage. While upstream and downstream from that site, there was a significant amount of bank erosion and migration and soil loss that took place during those floods. The right-hand picture is a little more fresh look at a stream, just the same stream, just after it's been done, but before the easement has grown up in vegetation and the grass strip has gotten itself established. But you can see the kind of bank sloping and along the way habitat feature installation that takes place on these projects. So you might wonder who can hold a public easement. In Wisconsin, we look at it this way. The state has a uniform conservation easement form that's built into the statutes that describes the primary language for the Wisconsin DNR Streambank easements. But counties and municipalities and other units of government can hold an easement. A 501c3 nonprofit, in the case of the Eagle Valley project, I believe it was the Arcadia Sportsman's Club that holds the easement. In Crawford County, Prairie Rod and Gun is holding some easements. Other groups like Land Trusts and in some cases Trout Unlimited hold easements on streams. And it's a nice way to, if your group has a conservation purpose and there's an opportunity to do conservation protection like a land trust or a conservation group like Alma Rod and Gun Club would do, the easement along a stream allows you to protect that stream and keep it in good shape. Easements generally allow certain things, but they don't allow other things. The things that they allow that you're really interested in for the county program would be conservation protection for the easement to reduce sediment and protect water quality, and then it allows public fishing access along that strip and via the access route. It allows habitat work and maintenance, and also allows wildlife watching and appreciation of nature. So that gives you a pretty good idea of the major purposes. But remember, we talked about the landowner reserving or retaining rights, and the things that you don't have on an easement, that you don't allow on an easement, are hunting, trapping, ATVs, camping, chopping down firewood with running from rails, ridging, bringing animals into a landowner's pasture. I mean, what better way to upset a landowner than to bring your dog along into the pasture where he's got stock of some sort. So we have gotten in some places to sign these easements by telling people no dogs. And I think in the years that I've been working with easements in the driftless area, probably one of the complaints that we find is from landowners is dogs in the easement. And you know, so it's important to say so, to lay out these things in a sign. And that sign on Eagle Valley, the last slide was very descriptive of the you know, respect the landowner, leave no trace. Some landowners get upset about people that have had gastric dysfunction and left something behind a tree that the landowner's dog gets to find. So people need to be cognizant of landowners' interests and keep them happy. Yes, they have a right to be on this, but they don't need to be disrespectful of landowners' rights. So if you wanted to set up a county easement program in your county, what steps would you take to do it? I think your land conservation committee should have a discussion, and your land conservation department ought to have staff involvement and input. And there are, you know, there are lots of concerns that people bring up. Some people say, well, how does this interfere with my right to farm on my land? Well, you know, these easements allow you to farm on your land. But they help you in that farming process because they protect that that land from having wild migration of the stream. So yes, you're going to be leaving a buffer along the stream, but on the other hand, the stream isn't going to be migrating out into your cornfield. So there are lots of potential impacts. Some people might say, well, are we going to lose tax revenue from this? And the answer is no. The landowner continues to own the property, to be able to use it, and pays taxes on it, and the landowner is able to sell it. And what I'm finding in the driftless area is that when people know that a stream is good enough to be considered for a restoration habitat project, often that becomes a selling point with certain buyers for reasons we'll talk about. So once the Land Conservation Department has had that kind of discussion, often with the Land Conservation Committee, I think it's also worthwhile to get your tourism committee involved in that, because there are benefits from having public access to streams that bring tourism, traveling anglers, and dollars into your community. Once the county decides that it's worthwhile to set up a county easement program, it's worthwhile to have the staff and the corporation council put together a form for that county. And that's one of the reasons that we've included the Buffalo County easement form in the materials that you have access to. I think it takes some language from other easements from other counties that have developed theirs over time, and it includes some things from that are from the DNR easement, but they're adapted to Buffalo County, and I think it's an excellent form and really a good starting point if your community is thinking about starting having county easements. You'll want to think about potential projects in your county, and on a more individual level, eventually individual landowners who may want to do conservation work on their stream and are willing to donate an easement for that to happen. The partnership side of a county easement program can involve your county's conservation groups and schools, and it can also involve a land trust in some cases, and it can also involve groups like Trout Unlimited that can help train these conservation groups on how to put together habitat projects and find funding and those sorts of things. And then eventually you get into project planning and funding, and those things fit together pretty well. You may start with a starter pilot, a pilot project or a starter project, and see how that goes. And if it's worthwhile, well, you may move into more of them. And that's one of the things about the success of the Buffalo County easement program and project program. Buffalo County and the NRCS and to some extent the DNR work really well with the 5 rod and gun clubs in Buffalo County, which are a really important part of the fabric of that county. And they have gone from essentially no easements and no public water on any of the county's trout streams 10 years ago to somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 or 12 miles, many of which have had habitat restoration projects and today. And it's an important resource for that community, and it's publicly accessible. You can also, as you set up that easement program, you're going to find that there are questions that landowners have and questions that the clubs might have. And it's worthwhile to develop a question and answer sheet. And I can provide that. I've worked with counties and I've worked with Trout Unlimited to develop those over the years. And DARE can help you with that. And a brochure for landowners to talk about what's an easement and what are the things to consider and what are the potential benefits. Those things are all very beneficial to your county. I think that being able to have a meeting in the county, after you've decided that it's worthwhile to explore this, having a meeting in the county and inviting uh, folks from government, folks from conservation clubs and the department, folks from the DNR, folks from potential funding sources to talk about how funding sources for a project would go. You're probably wondering whether there's some cost to the county of doing this. And I'd say really there's not very much cost involved. Your corp counsel will have some time involved. There are recording costs for recording an easement in the Office of the Register of Deeds, but those are comparatively minimal. And the rest of it is probably LCD staff time, working with NRCS, maybe DNR, maybe TDARE or Trout Unlimited chapters in your part of the state to develop the projects. Eventually, and well, we'll talk a little bit more. Buffalo County, as I said, they've used Land Conservation Committee has been very supportive, and the Tourism Committee has been. The easement form is excellent. There are partners from the local level and the regional level and the state and federal level. They get a fair amount of money from NRCS through the Farm Bill conservation programs, as well as support from Trout Unlimited and volunteers from the local clubs. This picture is Eagle Valley again, a stream day. It's a popular thing in Buffalo County. They get a couple hundred people from 6 months to 85 years old out there to see what's in that stream, and the kids get to seine it up for bugs, and you send them all home, all the kids home with a spinning rod. Local businesses benefit, and visiting anglers benefit from seeing those easement maps online. So here's the Buffalo County easement form, but I'm things about 2 last sentences. You don't have to read it. Just hand it to your corporation counsel and see what you put together for your county. One of the things that I will mention is I've talked about perpetual easements, and once upon a time in the 70s and 80s, easements, for instance, with the DNR were generally 20-year easements, because that was how long we figured that habitat projects would last. But you know, we've got habitat work all over the region that goes back to the 70s and 80s and 60s that has survived, even in areas where those easements have long expired. So that's one reason to have a longer term easement, is a recognition that habitat work lasts. And the other reason to have it is that it needs to run to the next landowner, so they don't think they can just come in and ignore the easement. And finally, funders like DNR Trout Stamp and Trout Unlimited, as a matter of policy, won't put money or volunteer hours into a project that doesn't have a permanent easement. So that's an important thing. It helps to have funds that'll support that project if you have a perpetual easement. So we'll talk a little bit about the value of public access. We've done some measurements of that value, and there have been surveys of anglers that show that they highly value public access and restoration. We commissioned a survey in 2016 in the Driftless area that found that over 55% of the visitors found access to be very important in their choices about where they came to fish. And nearly half found restoration was an important factor in their decisions, their preferences. So places that have a lot more access end up with a lot more visiting anglers and impacts in their communities. So there are a lot of different ways to benefit from these easements. Landowners can benefit in a lot of ways. They still continue to use the land in any way that they wish, as long as it doesn't interfere with the public use and the conservation purpose of the easement. So they can graze, if they don't overgraze it to death. They can plant crops, observing the buffer, and they continue to be able to sell and pay taxes on the land. most of this land is in floodplain, so it's not a matter of being unable to put a condominium development there, because you can't build in that floodplain anyway. They can also cooperate and benefit from a program that reduces erosion caused by floods, and it improves improves habitat. And I think some landowners think that it's important to improve that stream, leave it better than they found it, and make sure that their grandkids are going to be able to fish it, whether they own the land or not. So when we do those projects in the driftless area, they result in no cost to the landowner. We find the funds from outside sources, and often we hire local contractors to carry out the work. The benefit to the river health and the working lands is hundreds of tons of reduction in soil erosion. We had a project on Tater Creek in Crawford County last year that Paul Cron oversaw and did a great job on. And that 3,200 foot project reduces soil erosion by over 600 tons a year, and it reduces phosphorus loads by somewhere around 600 pounds a year. So in the Blue River in Iowa Grant County, where TU and NRCS and county and DNR have worked together for 20 years, they've had 20 miles of stream restoration, 20 miles of public access, and they've reduced that soil loss by over 5,500 tons a year, plus a reduction in phosphorus. So, you know, there are lots and lots of benefits that you'll see out there. So, you know, with a restoration project like Swins Valley outside of Arcadia, you have all kinds of benefits, and they not only go to the public, not only go to the public, but they go to the landowner. Local clubs do the maintenance. They designate the parking. Volunteers will come from all over the area to build stiles on that property. Schools can come out and do monitoring. Now I'm gonna tell you, I've mentioned donated easements, and I apologize, and thanks for reminding me, Carrie. Though there is a nominal consideration for these, a nominal payment, $1 to $10 for these easements. Oftentimes that has been paid by a club in the county, so there is no cost to the county. And also in Buffalo County, they have more landowners who are interested in providing those easements at, you know, nominal financial cost to the county. Then they have money to do conservation projects, to do the project. So it's not a big cost factor to the county. And in the driftless area, Paul Cron is also available to do technical design work and help your county LCD develop its skills and strengths at doing the design and survey and oversight of these projects. He's done over 20 miles of restoration work, and he's available to do that in a way that doesn't cost the county. And by the way, these easements can be described to be open during the Wisconsin trout fishing season. So there have been occasional places where people have not been interested in it because they interfered with some other hunting activity, but those are pretty few and far between. We found too that having good stiles, like good fences, is good for happy landowners and happy neighbors. And TU chapters, as I said, from all over will come in, and they've designed some style approaches that'll protect fences and get anglers of all shapes through those. The one in the middle is a design that was developed in Iowa and is built in the Iowa State prisons, and they're darn good. And the others are pretty widely used across the Wisconsin drift, the southern Wisconsin part of the driftless, and they've been making them better each time. Signage is important on these easements. I find that the more information that you can provide, the more ignorance you can dispel, and it's important to. I have found that there are things that really irk landowners. There are reasons that it's really important to thank contributors to a project, and most anglers don't intentionally do something stupid. They just if they do something stupid, it's usually because of ignorance about or a lack of consideration for the landowner or something else. So we like to have good good signage in place across the region, and I think it's important in your area too. Another access tool that we have is asking permission to fish. We're across the region, across the driftless area, about a fifth of the stream miles have legal public access. But my estimate would be that hospitable landowners will grant you permission if you ask to another 2 or 3 times that. But the other side of permission is that usually it doesn't result in watershed restoration projects unless the landowner bears the cost. Now, there are landowners that are just fine with doing their own restoration and paying for it and not allowing public access on the stream banks. But they also know that if you keep your feet wet in Wisconsin or in Minnesota, you can fish through that anyway. So the bottom line is that there's some benefit to water quality and erosion, although there's not often that is as much fish habitat benefit. So those projects can go forward. They just won't get support from Trout Unlimited. They won't get support from Wisconsin DNR Trout Stamp. So it's a two-sided thing with private land without easements. Mutual benefits, I don't need to read this one. The flexibility is important. The landowner's ability to keep using land and for working ag lands, that's important. And the description of what you can and can't do on an easement, those are benefits to everybody. You can see some of these places. The stream in the middle is a place that is migrating heavily and has a tremendous amount of soil loss. And I'm not exactly sure that I'd want to graze that too much because those banks will collapse. And the right-hand side, that stream has already had an improvement project and an easement, and the banks are sloped back, the grasses are in place, and there's there's no damage from those to that stream from those heifers. So there's a question about the DNR's easements. The DNR on streams it considers to be priorities will pay a landowner to purchase an easement. And what we've found is that there's broader protections and a little more complex set of rules covering those DNR easements, but they're very effective conservation tools. And I don't hear a lot of complaints from landowners about the DNR easement form, and I hear some happy landowners who have sold that easement. But in a stream where the DNR isn't considering it a priority, the DNR won't buy an easement, and that may be many streams in your county. So if the DNR is going to buy easements on streams in Vernon or La Crosse or Monroe County on high priority streams, that still leaves an awful lot of streams that can offer a lot of habitat improvement and land use benefits and water quality benefits without a landowner being paid. Some Sometimes landowners just don't want to work with the DNR for one reason or another, and oftentimes they do. But if the DNR isn't available to buy one, the county easement program is probably the next best thing. So when we do a restoration project, I've just got some representative examples going from left to right of a high banked stream with soft eroding soil those banks might go back in a storm, might recede in a bank, be eroded away by 6 or 8 feet at, those banks are 10 feet high. That's a lot of soil. And the lower left one is another one with a typical box elder corridor that's really pretty austere biotic environment where those box elders fall in and drag more soil in and clog it with more sediment. There's very little spawning habitat or exposed gravel or deep pools. So the volunteers, as in the upper center picture, come out and clear that box elder in a lot of cases. And then we'll get the heavy equipment in to slope those banks back at 3 or 4 to 1. That soil was sold to the contractor, and he's using it in landscaping projects. And then afterwards, in the upper right, you'll see the clear, narrowed stream, gravel bottom, and a lot more vegetation because you have more sunlight to come into the stream and grow vegetation that's good for the whole system. And this is the stream it goes through a public recreational area, and so it's great pheasant hunting. There are ducks and deer and other species in there. And then in the lower right, one feature that we like to add on those projects is other wildlife habitat. This side channel has space for turtles and frogs and snakes and waterfowl and shorebirds. And the adjacent area is habitat for pollinators. So you can see there are a lot of different benefits. Now this is a project in 2019 on Tainer Creek in Crawford County near west of Reedstown, where it's a Kickapoo River tributary. And these banks were that excavator in the last picture was sloping back those banks that were 7 feet, 8 foot high on average. And they created weirs, as in the left picture, and used root wads for habitat in the right picture. Now that's going to grow in, and it's going to be grass hedge, just like the ones in the previous slide. That's on a DNR easement. The DNR didn't do the work. Paul Cron supervised it with a contractor, and they did a really nice job of it. So the public easement holder, the public, I suppose you'd say, the angling public, you can see this is fishing the Holstein hatch on Timber Coulee, but people come from outside the area or inside the area to have access at places that it's clear. You don't have to run into an angry landowner. There are plenty of opportunities for restoration projects. They spread, if you have more than a few, you spread out the anglers, and they do put in place an ongoing maintenance need, but that's a kind of a nice volunteer opportunity for the FFA and the local conservation clubs and the TU chapters, and that's a matter of working with the easement holder, the Land Conservation Department, or to make sure that gets done. Some might ask whether who is anybody liable for injuries that occur on an easement? And the answer to that is generally no, not a landowner, not a county, not an easement holder, whether it's a county or a conservation club. And that is for injuries that occur because of somebody's negligence. If a landowner or somebody does something that is that's intended to hurt somebody, that's a different story. But as long as you're not charging for access to land, you're not liable. And that law was passed in, I don't know, the 80s perhaps, and every time the Supreme Court has visited it, it's broadened the immunity. So landowner and the county are not liable for immunity. So to sum it up, we found that there are plenty of benefits to everybody that's involved in an easement, and it benefits your healthy river. It benefits anglers locally and visiting. Community benefits because communities and schools and FFA and scouts and all get out to be involved in restoring a stream to health. And they have a chance to sort of anchor themselves to that stream in a way that probably is different than they thought of it before. The landowner benefits because they can get a project done that keeps their ag land working at no cost to themselves as a general matter. So it's possible that you might want to consider this for your county. So I would thank you for your time and attention, and I'd invite questions.
There's been some questions in the chat box. I don't know if you've been seeing those, Duke. Carrie's.
I think I've. Yep.
Yep, and I think
Thanks,
Carrie, you've been. Yep, I think you both have been answering those as we go. So this is your chance, everybody, if you want to mute yourself and ask questions to Duke or possibly Carrie, because she's been helping along the way. We'll take those questions now, or you can send them to the chat box. And Duke is here to answer those questions. Anybody have any questions? Again, any other questions out there, or did Duke just do such a great job covering everything that we don't have any questions? That's what he's going to be doing in a couple days.
A couple of days, retirement beckons. Thank you all. So
yes. Yes. And there's his contact information. And it's good to work with Duke. I've had a little bit of contact with him when I worked in Sauk County. So, and he's still working with Joe Van Berkel, and it's all good. We're all doing good things out there. And Kurt Deal, one of our famous fishermen, and he makes baits and everything like that from Dane County. It's a nice handling of the fish there with the hands. So,
well, thank you very much. It's been fun to put this together, and I hope it's going to be helpful for you.
Yes.
And thanks to everybody who contributed suggestions and information, and those of you that are running good programs, congratulations. Keep it up.
Yes, keep up the good work. Well, thanks, Duke. Carry on.
Thank you, Penny.
Okay,
appreciate
have
it.
a good day, everyone. Take care.